Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Hope you're all doing fantastic. Today we've got a wonderful live interview with sleep expert from the Monroe Institute. It's going to be a fantastic live. So comment below how many hours sleep you get because of your anxiety. So I want to see how many hours on average of sleep that you get because of your anxiety. And also, if you'd like to ask a question to our guest, if you use the question box, then we can get all the questions and hopefully go through as many as possible. So I'm just waiting for my guest to request to come on the live. His name is Luigi. Looking forward to speaking to him. So at the moment, we've got 6 hours, 4 hours. Someone's put they're about to go to sleep. Fantastic. They've been sleeping 5 to 6 hours, 2 to 3. I think in the middle of my anxiety disorder, it's probably roughly around 5 hours I was getting. And I remember thinking anything under 6 hours, then it started to get a problem for myself. So yes, I think the guest is ready. Nope, that's someone else who's wanting to come on. So Luigi, if you're in the chat, if you just click on to come on to the live, and then we will get you on for the interview. Really looking forward to speaking to this because a lot of us know that the relationship with anxiety and sleep often go in hand. So an anxiety disorder. So someone's Luigi, I'm here but not completely sure how to request. So if you click on the video at the bottom, it says request to join the live. Click on that and then we should have you on board. Couple of technical difficulties, guys, but we will get there. I've got all faith in Luigi. Greetings from Mexico. Hey, from Mexico, from the UK to Mexico. Struggling today, been to my GP. Did anyone have muddled speech? So when we seek the questions for anxiety symptoms, we can always relate to it, but that's all also reassurance seeking. And it's only a temporary fix as well. The best thing that you did today was go to the doctors to speak about that, which is fantastic. So what about oversleep? If you put that in the question box, guys, I might have to hop off the live and come back on and just have a quick word with Luigi just to let him know how to come on to the live. At the bottom, there should be a request, Luigi, to say, go on to the live. Request to go on to the live. If you just click that, and then I should be able to see your request and get you on. Someone's put oversleeping isn't yet. No, oversleeping is definitely an issue when it comes to anxiety as well. It can go both ways. You can have oversleeping and lack of sleep. Here we go. No, we're still waiting for press the plus and then the camera. See, Eden Thorpe, press the plus then the camera. I've got other people requesting to come on. I think we are right. I think we are ready. Are you ready, guys? So this will be a really interesting live to do with sleep, anxiety, and get your questions into the question box and we'll answer as many as you can.
There we go.
Hello, Luigi. You made it. I had all faith in you. I was going to restart, but I knew you'd pull through.
Fantastic. You know, I've never done this before. Many different formats of things, and I come across as TMI UK, so sometimes people think, okay, who's that guy? So yeah, it's lovely to be here, and thanks for inviting me onto your show. So
no, yeah, and thank you very much for coming on, and really looking forward to the chat today because a lot of people going through, as you know, we're an anxiety support community. A lot of people going through anxiety have lots of issues with sleep, so just be great to delve into that with you. Just if you can just start off with a brief explanation just about yourself, all the work that you do, and then just an introduction into just the company and everything.
okay. So I wear a few different hats, Dean. So I'm a UKCP registered hypnopsychotherapist. I'm a tutor for the National College of Hypnosis and Psychotherapy, so train people to be hypnotherapists and psychotherapists on a pathway to UKCP. And I'm also a residential trainer for the Monroe Institute, who are based out in Virginia, but have programs all over the world, and now an app called Expand, where they have exercises, meditations that help people to sleep, to get deeply relaxed and explore consciousness in various other ways. So that's kind of the general overview. And I use a lot of the technology that we have in the app in my professional practice as a psychotherapist. And I specialize primarily with sleeping and dreaming issues, parasomnias, nightmares, bad dreams, you name it, anything to do with the night in particular. And I work a lot with people with anxiety and depression in my one-on-one practice. But I also train groups of people to meditate, so mindfulness classes and so on. So it's all very, very interrelated. But that's a kind of general overview of what I do.
Fantastic. And just regarding the app, you said obviously you've had the app there. How long's that been going, and what can you find on the app? So if I wanted to download the app today, how would it, say I was struggling with my sleep because of anxiety, I was unable to see a therapist, maybe financially or whatever it was. If I was to download that app, would it help me with my anxiety? And yeah, what would be on there for me?
Yeah, there's plenty on there. Myself, a colleague who's a hypnotherapist, William Hard, we wrote a bunch of exercises that we actually use in therapy into the app because people were asking for it. So the app is called Expand Beyond Meditation, which is in Google stores and Apple stores. And it has plenty of meditations in that people can use for relaxation. One being, for instance, mental cleanse, which is a particular process of releasing things that can disturb you throughout the day and so on, so that you prepare yourself for the night, or you use it in the late evening. There's one that I call Dream Sanctuary, which I launched just as soon as the pandemic started. Really, it was, I think, at the end of March, April that I put that out there. It wasn't in the app at the time. We actually put it on a YouTube channel. The app's been around for exactly a year now.
Okay.
But what we found is that more and more people are engaging with it because of it.
Let me just pin the app name. A lot of people are asking for it. So it's Expand.
And so Beyond Meditation is the tag.
Expand Beyond Meditation, is it?
It's called Expand, and then it has a colon Beyond Meditation. So if you Expand Beyond Meditation by the Monroe Institute, you will find that in the various stores. And it's free to use. There is a pro membership to it, but there are plenty of meditations in it that people could find if they just get the free account. So that's what we wanted to put out there. And to begin with, it was, we had all kinds of meditations in there about relaxation, about sleep, and so on. But the anxiety has been something that we've been adding in as we've been going along, because we found that, for instance, what I found in my professional practice, the one-on-one work that I do with clients, I call that day and night therapy. So if people are interested, is that because sort of starting at the beginning of the pandemic, what was happening was, first of all, there was an anxiety about a random infection that was going around, and mortality rates were all over the place, and people didn't know what to do. They were put into lockdown situations, which was new for everybody. What I found, and many of my colleagues did, and many of the sleep professionals, that sleep disorders went up exponentially. They kind of doubled since after March 2020. The use of alcohol also increased quite considerably. And what we found in what people were reporting to us was that people were struggling to sleep. They were having more nightmares. And because of that, they were drinking alcohol to knock themselves out. They were, in the morning, really tired, because alcohol is a soporific, but it doesn't allow you to go into deeper stages 3 and 4 of sleep, and it interferes with that dreaming REM sleep. So you're not getting that deep, restful delta sleep in the first stages of the night, and you're not getting the mental recovery of REM, rapid eye movement sleep, in predominantly the second half of the night. So what would happen is they'd wake up, they'd take a stimulant, usually in the form of caffeine, and that has, 5-hour half-life, generally speaking, and people were drinking more and more of that to stay awake then. And what would happen is a vicious cycle, because you've got lots of caffeine in your system, then you're tired and you can't get to sleep, so people were then consuming even more alcohol to go to sleep.
Yeah. And both things as well. Caffeine, we know that can mimic anxiety symptoms with the nervousness, heart rate increasing, feeling on edge, and also alcohol as well. We know that the next day, scientific studies show that it can increase anxiety. So having both of them is only going to increase your anxiety as well. Regarding sleep, do you, and this is a question that we get asked a lot, we have asked other psychologists, psychiatrists before, but I'd love to know your take on it. Do you think that someone going through an anxiety disorder needs to have a certain amount of sleep? So you see when you come across resources that it's like, oh, your optimum level of sleep is between 7 and 8 hours. Well, in the anxiety community, a lot of people start to get anxious if they don't hit that 7 or 8 hours mark, and it's almost like keeps them in the loop of lack of sleep and anxiety. What's your take on that?
Very much echoing that. I mean, of course, there are studies out there that show, on average, and this is the point, the average is between 7 and 8 hours sleep is optimal. However, that's a bell curve distribution, and that's at the peak. That means there are people who are long sleepers, there are people who are short sleepers, there are people who are early birds, they go to sleep earlier and wake up earlier. There are people who are late sleepers and wake up later, and then everybody else is somewhere in between. So it's important to not just hit that figure, but actually to work with the rhythms that best support your own personal style of sleep. So there is a condition, a type of insomnia, orthosomnia, which has kind of come out in the last 5 years, which is when people are getting these sorts of things. I mean, I use a Fitbit, but any sleep tracker, I'm not just looking at Fitbits here, any sleep tracker only goes off motion and heart rate to work out when you sleep. So they're reasonably okay for identifying when you fell asleep and when you woke up, because it goes off the principle that if your heart rate is reduced but you're moving, then you're probably in deep sleep. Right? Isn't paralyzed. When you go into dreaming sleep, then you go into sleep paralysis so that you don't act out the dream. So heart rate can go up because dreaming is often referred to as paradoxical sleep. So it means that your heart rate and activity is almost the same as when you're awake, but your movement is nil or negligible. And so when it gets those two, it says, oh, you were in deep sleep for this amount and you were in REM sleep for this amount. However, that isn't a wonderful measure. To get an accurate measure of your sleep, you need a polysomnograph, which requires an EEG on your head to measure the an extra electrooculogram measuring your eye movements, because when you've got the paralysis, you can still move the eyes, rapid eye movement, and something on the chin, like a chin strap, to measure muscle distension. So when you've got into the paralysis, it distends, and that would be an electromyogram or something like that. So what you have there, with those three things, you've got a polysomnograph. Obviously, those three things are not included in this. So then people look at the app and they say, oh my God, I haven't got enough delta sleep, I haven't got enough REM sleep, and there's something wrong with me, and so on. And I've worked with people, like, for instance, who are athletes, and they have a low resting heart rate anyway. So if the heart rate is low, but they're not moving, then it can sometimes blend out with light sleep rather than thinking that it's REM sleep. And so there can be confusion. So the accuracy of the different stages is actually really low. It's in the 30-odd percentiles in terms of accuracy. So use it as a general measure if you're using these, but don't get bogged down with the detail, because they're not particularly accurate at identifying where you were throughout the night. And if you have extra stress and anxiety, then probably best you just put it in the bin or give it to.
No, I was just going to say, because I know that when I went through an anxiety disorder, I had like an overlapping health anxiety. And when you get fixated, like you just mentioned, on your heart rate or how long you've been in certain amounts of sleep, it really is and can become counterintuitive and create more anxiety and less sleep. So my advice to anyone who's fixating and ruminating on the fitness watch is exactly what you say. Take it off for the time being, going through an anxiety disorder, because it's going to be more harm than what it is useful.
Yeah, and you know, again, just coming back to that figure of between 7 and 8 hours, just do the best you can. That will be the best thing. So, you know, that's a figure that is an average. It doesn't even make sense to get 7 hours sleep because we tend to sleep in 90-minute cycles. So really, we do like 7.5 hours or 6 hours or 9 hours. So that's 7. Again, you know, we're talking about average information. And when we look across the lifespan and what it does is there are other factors that are far more important. Sleep is just one of them, but obviously diet, lifestyle, whatever's going on in your personal life can have a much more significant impact in your general well-being. So you might be hitting 7 hours, but you're eating McDonald's every day. Probably not the best. So, you know, you've got to kind of look at it as a holistic system, and that's really what it is, you know. So sleep is one part of it.
Just one tool in the system. So you touched on that you incorporate hypnosis and also meditation and mindfulness. Do you do them like together, or are they just like separately that you do? And also, can you just explain the benefits of hypnosis and mindfulness and meditation for anxiety?
Yeah, very much so. So they're all interrelated. You know, when you look at traditional meditation practices, you know, things like bhavana meditation, where you're focusing on a mantra and so on, then that kind of seems a little bit alien to us in the West. But really, actually, we're doing a lot of mantra meditation every single day. You know, so when we have a ruminating thought, what we're saying is the world is not safe, bhavana. You know, or I don't like my job, bhavana, or I don't, you know, I have an issue with a partner, bhavana. So, you know, this is already a mantra, and what's happening there is that's really starting to go into your unconscious. That's your building up your worldview, and those kind of thoughts have momentum. So they build momentum, and then they carry on into the night. And because they built momentum throughout the day, and we've been focusing on them so much, then we focus on them beautifully as soon as we close our eyes and don't focus on anything else. Then it highlights even more so, and that's one of the problems with sleep onset insomnia, the different types of insomnia, but sleep onset, so difficulty falling asleep.
So you believe that ruminating anxious thoughts actually carry on through to when you start to sleep?
Very much so. Then they can make dream content emerge, so bad dreams, nightmares, very much a reflection of what you've been thinking about during the day, and they just hold up a mirror to where you've been in your thoughts throughout the day. So the nightmares aren't there to beat you up in any way, they're just there to highlight some unfinished business, and also usually have some sort of mechanism in there to identify what you can do about them. So these are the things that you're running away from, notice them. And then when you wake up in the morning, there's the same energy, so the same thoughts continue. So this is why mindfulness practices are really useful, because they help you to just get a little bit of an objective view of those thoughts and just derail those thoughts and the momentum that they're building up. So normally mindfulness, you do something like 20 minutes of meditation in the morning, 20 minutes in the evening, and it just breaks up that thought process. It adds something in there saying, you know, is this true? Is this true all the time? Can I look at this in a different way, and so on? Because we know that anxiety really is imagination about the future. It's not really useful to frame it that way. Oh, it's just your imagination. I'm saying that is your reality. Imagination colors everything that we do. So what we're doing with imagination in hypnosis mindfulness meditation essentially is the self-hypnosis. Is changing what you're saying to yourself. You're saying, I'm going to look at this slightly differently. And what that means then is that what we can do is, rather than focusing on what we don't want, we focus on what we do want. And sometimes that can seem a bit too far in our emotional range. So if we start from the position of, I want to be free of this anxiety, well, in hypnosis, there's a law of reverse effect. So you'll know about this. It's don't think about the pink elephant. Well, in order to not think about the pink elephant, then you have to construct the thing that you don't want in order to negate it. So that requires a lot of energy, a lot of mental energy to stop that from happening. That is how the mind works. It works with metaphors, it works with symbols, and so that is what it will latch onto and then say, how do I stop this, how do I stop this? And that's essentially the roots of rumination. When we use our imagination in a slightly different way, though, we can say, okay, well, what would it be like to be free of that? How would I want to live? How would I want to be? How would I even notice that the anxiety is gone? What would that look like, sound like, taste like, smell like, whatever? And then when you place your focus on that, your mind can't be in two places at once. So you start to create a new reality, which first of all exists in your imagination, in hypnosis, and then it starts to bit by bit filter through into your waking reality. The other thing then that we work with in hypnosis is what's going on in your subconscious. Because I often find that it's not your conscious mind that has the problem, but something in the unconscious. So people come to me and they say, I don't want this. They know exactly what they don't want. They know what it is. And they're very intelligent people for the most part. I've never somebody who comes and I just think, you're so dense, you're not going to be able to work this out consciously. If you could have worked it out consciously, you probably would have. Right? So if we try to work it out logically, you probably would have worked it out. But it's a bit like Niels Bohr said. You're not thinking, you're just being logical. When we move the logical part slightly to one side, the conscious mind's domain, then we can start to talk to those unconscious influences, those things that think they're protecting us in some way, but are actually creating and maintaining the problem. So that's the bit that if you ever find yourself explaining something to somebody and go, oh, no, that's not what I meant. What I mean is blah, blah, blah. That bit, that recognize that what you were saying wasn't it, is the thinking bit. It's that intuitive. And the rational bit then couldn't express something that you knew intuitively. So we try to go to that bit and say, okay, well, what strategies do you have for dealing with this particular situation? And could we develop something differently? And so it's rather than, I'm being punished by my unconscious mind like in a nightmare. So, well, why is it flagging that up? Because it thinks it's protecting you in some way. So it's probably useful for us to visit that, find out what it's trying to do, and find a new strategy so that all of your needs can be met, both conscious and unconscious. And the evidence of the unconscious mind is that you're still alive. So even
just regarding the new strategies, what would you, how would you approach it then? Would it be about, like you say, training the different scenario and almost correcting the inner critic?
Yeah, or the outer judge. It's still a perceived thing internally. Without sort of like bashing that bit, because the unconscious has as evidence the fact that you're still alive. You might be having a really difficult time in your life with your anxiety, but it says, look, you're still alive. I protected you from going out. There's dangers out there. Look at the news. People get stabbed, whatever else. So I'm keeping you from going out there. And the evidence that that's working is that you're still alive. So it's very much in those basic needs, kind of the bottom of Maslow's pyramid, to say, here's the safety, and this is how it's being met. And then we can say, okay, well, that's kind of a really binary, black and white way of viewing reality. It's either I don't get killed or I do get killed, and we're very much stuck in this fight or flight response. And so that's, and what we want to do is kind of move into the rest and digest and, the parasympathetic system, get that kicking in. So the way that we do this is safely in imagination. That's essentially what we're doing with hypnosis. We're narrowing the focus down so that you notice other options. Because when we're in fear, then essentially some of the critical thinking part of the brain, I always like to have a brain handy. Yeah, we thank whoever this is who donated. But this part of the brain tends to lose blood flow. You know, we know that it goes to other older areas of the brain, especially, you know, the brain stem and the fight or flight responses, the amygdala, all those kind of bits that are emotional regulation, and you name it. Right, so frontal lobe, that's the bit that kind of says, hold on a minute, let me just work this through. That's not getting as much blood flow, it's not getting as much interconnectivity and so on. We need to bring this online. And it's almost the same thing that happens when we fall asleep. Because when we fall asleep, the frontal lobe, especially the prefrontal cortex, this bit, starts to shut off. And that's why in a dream, if something weird happens, we take it for, yeah, that's no problem. Big elephant enters the room, just take a seat. It's called dream logic. So we can have that kind of dream logic, maybe not to that same extent, but in the waking state as well. So we only think that there's two solutions to things. The solution is either do the maladaptive behavior that's preserving the anxiety, or die. You know, those are your options. Yeah. And so when you pull back, so when you take the mindful attitude, which can be massively facilitated with hypnosis, because we can dissociate a little bit from the problem space, then we start to see more decision space. How else could we imagine being in this scenario, dealing with this differently? And that then is done in a safe space, is done in the safety of being in the therapeutic encounter, you're not being judged on trying different things out. So that all adds up in a way that says, okay, let's try something new. And the thing is, when you're doing this work in trance, so you're deeply relaxed and inwardly focused, and we all go into trance throughout the day, all the time. You know, if you've ever driven a vehicle and just found yourself arriving at the destination, you were in trance. You know, that if you were engrossed in a movie or in a book, that's trance. So, you know, when you lose that kind of awareness of your environment, that's essentially what we're talking about in hypnosis. So it's not the pocket watch thing or cluck like a chicken. You know, I mean, it's
what would you say to the people who say, I'm really interested, I want to do this hypnosis, I want to do mindfulness meditation, but when I try it, all I can do, or all that happens is I begin to ruminate on my anxious thoughts and my anxious sensations. Yeah, what would your advice to them be?
You know, this goes to the core of how mindfulness is usually taught, because it's one aspect of a whole system of meditation. And the mindfulness, the objective position, is one thing to be trained, but what tends to happen, and various studies seem to confirm this, is that when people start a mindfulness practice, you get about 20% of people who report negative experiences, because exactly what you said, you know, they start to notice things, the ruminating thoughts, or they start to notice that there are things in their life that they don't particularly like so much, and you know, you can become aware that you've been doing a dead-end job for 15 or 20 years, or in a relationship that is not particularly supportive of where you are and how you want to be, and so on. That's perceived as negative, but what it's doing is it's raising your awareness. So what I would say is that it's really useful to work with somebody who can support that. You know, working with a therapist, if you can, who understands mindfulness and can say, okay, this is a process, but then you have to come into so that's the objective process. You observe your thoughts, and then you have to come back into choices and making subjective decisions in this reality. And that's where the ability to translate that objective perspective into something that's useful for you in the waking state is vital, and therefore it can be facilitated. So if you take the app, for instance, you know, we don't just do mindfulness exercises, or meditations, but we also have meditations that work on just breathing deeply and you know, really connecting with the breath, so that you can, instead of doing all that chest breathing, which actually pumps up the sympathetic system, we can relax the vagal tone and you know, kickstart a parasympathetic system. And really move into that deep belly breathing, the centeredness, what it feels like to actually be in your body, and develop relaxation tools that way, so that you know that if you do start feeling and ruminating and whatever else, that you've got some strategies like, okay, well, I know that comes up, but I am the observer of my thoughts. I am not my thoughts. So being the thinker of your thoughts, you can choose, well, I don't have to follow every single thought that I have. Here's another thought that I can go to. Or, you know, sometimes what you find in like New Age sort of circles is that you know, I'm really struggling, and the mantra that I say to myself is that this will never get better, and you know, when will it stop, and how do I get past this? And then they say, no, you want to be saying affirmations to yourself. I'm a strong, confident person, anxiety and so on. And there's a part of you that says, bull, because it's just too far out of your emotional range. So what I often do with my clients is just come to neutral. You know,
that's exactly what I say, yeah.
Yeah, it's always going to be like this. Always? Really? How's that cup of tea that you had this morning? It was actually quite nice. Right, so that challenges that really all or nothing kind of thinking. And when you just keep derailing that, just very gently, just challenging it. You know, I have clients that say, you know, like, especially with depression, you know, like, oh, you know, I had a terrible week. The whole week, just tell me about that. Just break it down. And when you start to chunk it down like that, you find that actually the thing that they didn't like was something that happened between 3 and 5 o'clock on Monday. And that colored the rest of the week. It's like when people go on holiday, they have a fabulous holiday, and then they come back and the flight was delayed and the kids were screaming and there was an argument with the spouse or whatever it is. Oh, it just ruined the whole thing. Like, come on. You know, it couldn't have. You can't retrospectively undo experience. You had that. That was good. You enjoyed it, and then something else happened, right? So it's about breaking it down, and again, you know, just moving out of this black and white way of viewing reality, which is the realm of that that fight or flight system. Am I safe? Am I not safe? That's the how it views reality. When you move into that more right-brained way of viewing the world, where new information can come in, because you know, we know that the hemispheres of the brain are, you know, the brain's divided. The left brain is all about categories. It creates a map of the world, and then it thinks that's the world. That's the problem. So what you get is, he says, the world's not safe. And what's your evidence? Well, like 10 years ago, something bad happened. You know, that's my evidence. Yeah. And then it just stays in that space. And of course, it's not letting any new information in. So how can you get out of that thinking? The right brain is all about holistic ways of perceiving reality. It's about the lived experiences, about the flow of information coming in. So when you can start to move more into the peripheral field, which is the realm of the right brain, then you allow new information in. So one of the things that we do in the app, you know, it's not just guided meditations, but we have frequencies that support your brain into being able to get out of a particular configuration and into one that's more conducive to being able to access these spaces. So the brain works with, you know, it operates with, obviously there's electrical signals going on, and they ripple in cycles, okay? When you measure that, you'll see that it oscillates in the measurement is cycles per second, that's hertz. And when you're awake, you're somewhere in the sort of beta ranges. So that means, you know, you're maybe 13 to 20 or 25 cycles per second, right? When you're in deep sleep, you're really low. You're like 2-3 cycles per second. So that's where we have to get to. So if you're up in 25 and you're trying to get to 3, that's quite a distance. So yeah, we have frequencies. We use several different types of frequencies, like binaural beats, which was.
How would them frequencies work with the app? What would I have to do? So if I had the app, do you just click on it?
Slap some headphones on. That's all you need, and basically your brain will start to generate the beat frequency. You need stereo headphones. You'll have signals coming into one ear and signals coming into the other, and your brain works out the difference between the two signals coming in and starts to beat at a frequency which is the differential. So if you're trying to get the brain into deep sleep, for instance, say 3 cycles per second, then you would play something that had, you know, like 200 hertz in one ear and 203 in the other, and your brain would work out the difference of 3 hertz and start to beat at that in about 5 or 10 minutes of listening to it. So what that means is that you can start to guide the brain waves very gently using sound frequencies into a new configuration. And so if your brain waves are up in the beta ranges where it feels really stressful, you know, when we're in beta, that's a stressful range, then we can guide it down into like a concentration range of about 13 cycles per second. That's a good beta. You know, you can really pay attention in that. You can create and remember things very easily and so on. So we can play things like that. But you can't just play, say, 13 cycles or hertz to your brain because it's below the hearing threshold. So we have to make the sound up in slightly higher carrier frequencies. And that starts to get all technical and whatever else. Just to know that we've been doing this at the Monroe Institute since, well, I mean, Bob Monroe started doing it in the 60s, essentially. As the Monroe Institute, it was 1973. So we have years worth, it will be 50 years next year, that we've been guiding people into restful states of consciousness. And so we have plenty of things that help people to sleep. And
that's really, really interesting. So, because often people in the community always say that nighttime anxiety is probably one of the main things. And like you said, once we shut down from everything, from the distractions of the day, turn our phones off, turn the TV off, then you just sat there with your thoughts. When they're in that anxious state, so this was a question that I wanted to ask is, could they use that app in the middle of the night? Because we have a lot of people who wake up with like night terrors or night anxiety. What would they be able to get the app and then use that? And would that?
Yeah, very much so. So that's why I designed the exercise Dream Sanctuary, because it was something to be played before you go to sleep. And there are two other exercises. One's called Fast Asleep, and another one called Mindful Rest. And both, so the mindful rest and fast asleep are two exercises that you can play to fall asleep. And for some reason, I found that some clients, like half of the clients, like fast asleep, and half of them like mindful rest. I don't know why. It's just a personal preference thing, but they do tend to fall asleep using those. The thing about Dream Sanctuary, and the reason why I made it, and it related to the pandemic specifically, is that people felt unsafe. And so this was about getting deeply relaxed, connecting with a part of yourself that is your deeper being, your inner self, unconscious, however you want to describe it, and get that sort of agreement with yourself that you're okay, you're safe. And then to plan your nighttime. So you plan a dream for the night, for instance. And this is something that I often work with people with nightmares or bad dreams. The difference being nightmares has an interruption, a bad dream, you stay in it. So if you wake up from the bad dream, that's a nightmare. Is to actually be actively involved in creating the dream. So you can do things like take a nightmare, and how would you interact with it differently knowing that it's a dream? How would you do that? I sometimes teach people to become conscious in their dreams so that they have lucid dreams, so that they can consciously interact with the narrative of the dream while it's happening. So the dream is something that's happening to them, and that isn't really difficult to do, because when we have nightmares, they're very, very strong in their emotions. They're more likely to repeat because of that. So nightmares tend to recur. You're saying about night terrors is exactly the same thing. Similar. So we go in actively into the night. We say, this is how I want to engage with the night, and just really feel that connection with yourself. This is you talking to yourself in the night. And nightmares and bad dreams and just dream content that might be slightly disturbing, we tend to think that it's kind of like, what's that? It's weird stuff. Let's have a drink in the morning. But there's always a message. It's always about uncovered business. So, normally what I find is that the nighttime gets it in the neck, but actually the causes of that are daytime things. And sometimes it can be that people have insomnia because they think, I can't have another day like today because I had bad sleep. So there's now anxious about, again, it's imagination of the future. If I don't sleep enough, then that interaction with my boss or with my spouse or whoever it is, my friends, it's going to be like it was today, and I can't do that again. So now they're like, why am I not asleep? I'm only going to get 8 hours, the clock watching, and that's just adding and adding and adding to it. So this was focusing on what you want. And when we do that, then bit by bit, we can retrain the brain to do something differently. First in imagination, then that carries through into your waking reality. So that's within in the app as well. So, but the tones are supporting that as well. So sometimes we feel like we can't physically do it. Well, it's okay. You've got a personal trainer in the app, someone who's helping you to lift those weights, essentially, until your brain has retrained itself. Because, we know about neurogenesis, we know about neuroplasticity. And so if you've been doing this for 30 years, then, it would be quite miraculous if a 30-minute meditation solved all of that.
Yeah.
You're probably going to get some sort of immediate effect, but then you need to just work with that a little bit, just keep working with it. It feels good, so it'll be auto-reinforcing, and that's going to lay new neuronal pathways so that you can do something differently. And
so how long would you say until someone starts to see the benefits? And also, if they don't see it straight away, what would your advice be to them just to continue and almost start a new practice?
Yeah, I've had people that have just done one exercise and they're fine. I've worked with clients who haven't been able to sleep well for 7 or 8 years, even longer in some cases, and just one session with them has put them right. I've had many snoring insomniacs on my workshops at the Institute and also in one-on-one practice. The main thing there is to say, actually, it's safe. Your unconscious isn't trying to beat you up. It isn't trying to hurt you in any sort of way. It's just trying to highlight something. So actually, when we work with it and decode those kind of messages that happen in dreaming, then there's usually a little bit of an aha moment. I get what that's about. And it's not just about understanding your dreams, for instance. It's about actually applying the message. So once you do that, then you can resolve the issue. Because if dreams are about unfinished business and your unconscious is trying to get your attention, it does that through a nightmare, then it's not just trying to get you to interpret things. It's saying, the unconscious is saying, this is where you are right now. And this is the data that I have about your waking reality. I can't resolve this problem without getting the conscious mind involved and doing something new. So here's something to try out that's new, and then when that happens, we might be able to resolve this conflict. So the interpretation is one part, but then the application is the next part. When you bring it to life, when you take the thoughts to new places, when you take behaviors and emotions to new places, then your unconscious has new material to work with and it can resolve the nightmare. So when you do that, then it's conscious and unconscious minds working together, and so the conflict resolved, the story relaxes, and usually the person then doesn't have the nightmare anymore. So, people who've had nightmares for 20 years, recurring, I just finished working with somebody who was having it, 3 or 4 times a week for about 10 years. We resolved it in 2 sessions.
That's really interesting, because you do hear the people who've been dealing with sleep anxiety issues for the longer time, who are almost stuck in that way, who believe that they're not going to come out of it. So that's really amazing to hear that you said you've had clients 10 years, 20 years. That doesn't make a difference.
Very much. The thing is, the unconscious is very patient. So if you think that you haven't got the message, you'll say, I'll just keep sending this again, and it can get stuck in loops. So you'll just keep saying, I'll just keep sending this. But when we become more deliberate, when we say, show me that again, but in a different way, a way that I'll understand a bit more, then things start to change. And this is where it's about building a relationship with yourself. But this part of you is, it doesn't usually use verbal language only. It uses symbolic communication, it uses symbolic language. That's why it seems that dreams are weird, because it works with metaphors. And it works with metaphors that you've experienced usually in the last week. So when that starts to happen, then you say, well, oh yeah, that was really weird. Well, it wasn't. This is just you having to learn a symbolic language. But you already had that. This is how you used to think before you started internalizing verbal language. So before the age of 3 or 4 years old, for instance, you were thinking purely in symbols and images and all that kind of non-verbal stuff. You just forgot. And then those are the sorts of things that usually can influence us. And then, we go, oh, okay, well, it's weird because I can't think to it. So if you start thinking differently, if you start thinking in the language of the dream, which is symbolic, so this is using your imagination, not just your imagination. Your imagination is it entirely. Once you start using your imagination, then you can start to build up a vocabulary of dreaming. And, one of the things I invite my clients to do, my participants to do, is dream journal. Write your dreams down, externalize them, have some sort of way of recording them. Because this is a way then that you start to notice the patterns. And when you notice patterns, then you can plan and you can do different things with them.
We really are a product of the stories we tell ourselves. I can see there's so many questions. I do want to get through a few of them, Luigi, before I let you go.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah, there's so many. I'm just going to pick them out. So first one, how to deal with a dream related to an old trauma.
Yeah. So the first thing to do is to know that, you know, the trauma's with you now. You know, we think of something being old, but it's how does it affect us in this moment? So what is the story that's happening in the dream, and how would you like to steer this in a new way? You know, you say, okay, well, this is what happened. So if I was having a nightmare, and I haven't had nightmares for about 15 or so years, the reason being because I've worked with them. And I sit with a nightmare and I say, okay, you got me. You got my attention, right? That wasn't the nicest way of doing it. You know, I mean, anybody who's had a nightmare will know that they can be pretty horrible, right? You wake up, your chest pounding, you're sweating, you don't want to go back to sleep and so on. So they're not the most pleasant thing. But then you just step back from that just for one moment. So once you've externalized it, already you're saying, this is important for me to understand. So that's why you write them down. And then I would look at the elements of it and say, okay, how would I like this to go? And, you know, if it's something that's attacking you, or you're attacking something else, and or you know, because there's usually a top dog and an underdog in the nightmare, something attacking you in some way, you know, causing an issue, or you are the aggressor in some sort of way. So how would you like to behave in that situation? And what tends to happen is that our basic survival strategies are pushed into the dream. So we behave in a fight or flight kind of way when we feel threatened. But actually, all of the dream elements are you, they're nobody else. Everything in the dream is the yourself. So when I know that, then when I look at a nightmare, I can say, okay, since all of those elements are me, then how do I want to relate to myself? And if there's something chasing me, then I can just imagine just stopping and saying, well, you can't harm me because you're part of me, and we're aspects of one thing. And actually, there isn't a self that can be destroyed in the dream. You'll just wake up, right? So from that safety, then how do I want to relate to myself? And I'll just stop and just say to the nightmare, tell me what you need to know. Tell me what you would like me to do. How can we come into greater connection? Because if there's a part of me that's stuck in an old trauma, then how can I bring that back into myself? You don't have to play that game anymore. It's adding the insult to injury. If something horrible happened in the past in that traumatic event, then that's gone. Or if there was somebody there, well, that's not the person who might still be in your dream. If you were abused by somebody, the abuser in the dream is just an aspect of yourself. So you can actually, that's got nothing to do with forgiving or hugging somebody who was an abuser. But it's saying to a part of yourself, you don't need to play that role anymore. Come back. Yeah?
That's a really interesting reframe, and I think a lot of people, well, I imagine, you know, aren't aware of that it's all made up, like you say, from themselves. And I imagine that can be quite eye-opening as well for some of your clients.
Massively so. You know, I find that, you know, what tends to happen is this. Whenever you challenge a nightmare in an open way, so I'm not saying stay in the fight or flight, it's about, you know, a loving connection with yourself, essentially. When you get into that space and you say, you know, you don't need to play that anymore, the nightmare usually transforms. A nightmare figure that's chasing after you turns into a puppy, or it just dissolves into a brilliant light, or just something beautifully transformative like that. And, you know, the nightmare is so creative, the dream world is so creative that it'll just come up with something that really moves you. You know, it's a very cathartic process for most people. Yeah.
Oh, that's a great answer. Next question. I just can't seem to relax for a full REM sleep cycle. While waking up, I feel like my mind starts running instantaneously. I don't know what to do. Do you have any tips?
Yeah, I mean, there's some exercises in the app that would probably be useful for that. The Dream Sanctuary one and even Mental Cleanse would be recommended, because, you know, what's happening there is you've got that activation is now happening, but it's happening very quickly, and you've got it's paradoxical sleep, so your brain is operating very, very quickly, immediately, and it starts to go into a running response, essentially, of either a fight or a flight. So the key there is to just work with the body and just work with whatever's in there that might be holding some sort of tension, not forcing it, just observing it is enough. Noticing the parts of your body that are actually softer and moving your awareness into that. And bit by bit, we can guide the tension out of the body. Sometimes I find it useful to actually move right into the tension. So if you find a part that's tense and won't relax, then just make it even more tense and just really crank it up and then release it. So there are many, many different techniques and so on that we use in our programs with the app and in the day and night therapy practitioners that can very much help with that. But don't force relaxation. Relaxation is a process of moving your mind to something that you want rather than what you don't want, and things will naturally relax anyway. Your body already knows how to relax. You watch a newborn baby, they just breathe through the belly. They don't have to be taught that. That's what they do. They don't hold their breath when things are tense or whatever. That's what we start to do afterwards. We start to add stuff. So your body naturally knows how to sleep. It knows how to relax. It knows how to stretch properly and take tension out. It's all the things that we've learned and added and conditioned and saying, "Oh, don't do that. That doesn't." It all starts to accumulate, and that was the momentum that I was talking about. That when we go into a mindful perspective and we step back from it a little bit, we can start to derail it. So that's the idea behind that.
That's fantastic. If people want to work, so obviously we're a worldwide community, so if people want to work with you guys outside of the app, are you available worldwide?
So the Monroe Institute, in terms of its programs, it teaches people how to meditate very deeply, expanded states of consciousness in particular, so really working with those intuitive aspects of the self. And it's based in Virginia in the United States. That's where the main campus is, but we have outreach trainers all over the world. And so if you go on the Monroe Institute website, which is Monroe, spelled like Marilyn Monroe, institute.org, then you'll find everything that we do on there. Obviously, there's the Expand app. And if you want to work one-on-one, then really dayandnighttherapy.com is where I offer that, and I have a few colleagues who are also trained in being able to work with these sorts of deep states of relaxation, who also use these frequencies and so on in their work.
Oh, that's fun. After the live, I'll get all the links from you and we'll pop them in the story so everyone can download and check that out, which is great. So the next question is it possible to stop panic attacks waking up at night, preventing me from getting to sleep if it's possible?
Yeah, very much so. But, again, we come back to the same issue. You're getting it at night because that's the only time that you're really stopping. When you're just dropping everything away, as I said, the nighttime gets it in the neck. So that's when you notice it the most. The key with panic attacks and anxiety attacks in general is to sort of work with them a little bit more in the day, and just really knowing how to gently de-stress and gently release the tension throughout the day, so that by the time you get to the night time, you just flow into it smoothly. So it's more of, just notice, and that's the mindful attitude. So again, some of the meditations that are in the Expand app are what we do in our residential or online programs at the Institute, can help to relax, to center you, to work with your imagination and so on, so that you notice the triggers and so on earlier in the day, and gain more insight, because here the key is to raise your awareness in general. And when you have that raised awareness, then these things can bother you less, because they don't have to come so dramatically at nighttime. The nighttime gets it dramatically because it's got your attention undivided. So it says, here, have this message. But then we don't know what it is, and it frightens us. So it's if you start to work with dreams, for instance, if you start to notice throughout the day how you feel, and when you've moved out of your center, then the messages don't have to be as dramatic. You might still get messages saying, this is how you can self-improve in some way during the night. in your dreams, but they don't have to be nightmares. You know, so we can come to a point eventually where we appreciate where we are, whatever the experience is in this moment, and we can also look forward to what's to come without devaluing where we are. I'll be better when this thing happens. Well, you know, just find the part of you that's soft right now, you know, and work with that and open that up and you know, give yourself a hug, essentially, throughout the day, and that starts to carry through into the nighttime. Yeah.
No, that's wonderful. And like you say, just changing that narrative, because the way we talk to ourselves matters so much with anxiety disorders. And if you do wake up with, say, a panic attack, would you say, am I right in saying that probably you're not going to be getting to sleep anytime soon or straight away after the panic because you're still in that fight or flight mode?
You know, but the thing is, you know, fight or flight's a bit like a pain response, you know, and so the difference between pain and suffering in a nutshell, you know, you put your hand on a hot stove, ow, that's pain, right? That's a signal, you're a lot of danger. Suffering is the story you tell yourself after that. So, ow, what an idiot, why did I put that? Who turned on that hot stove? God, next time I find that person, I'm going to knock them out. That's suffering. So, you know, how you maintain it. So when people have panic attacks during the night, there might be the response because your limbic system's fired up and you're just starting to relax, and then something in the brain stem's kicking in. Very much a biological response, fight or flight, 90 seconds, you know, your system's flooded with adrenaline and cortisol. So that's fine. But to maintain that is what you're saying. What's wrong with me? Am I going to have a heart attack? When will this stop? God, I'm never going to be able to get a good night's sleep, etc., etc., etc. That's then fueling it beyond those 90 seconds where there's a physiological response. So the key then is, you know, what I would normally do is just get up. Yeah. Get up, go into another room, do something boring. You know, I had a client who went and did a jigsaw. You know, fantastic strategy, because it was something that focused the mind on something else. It was relatively menial, but engaging enough, so it wasn't going to hyperstimulate him. And it was just a way of just saying, hey, you know, just settle on this, but don't force it. Don't pick the one with a million beans. You know, just something that, because that might stress you out. You know, just pick something that, you know, is a pleasant enough image. And, you know, work with that. And then when you start feeling tired, then return to bed. You know,
yeah, I used to find reading really helped me because you naturally, when your eyes start to tire, and like you say, you naturally start to feel tired, and then you can go back again. So that's great. Have we got enough time to squeeze in 2 questions? Is that all right?
Go for it.
There's so many of them. Well, I'm just trying to pick some good ones that we haven't already covered. So it won't be a second.
Sure.
Can you stop overthinking your bad dreams during the day? So you've had a bad dream and now it's really playing havoc with you the next day or all week. How do we interrupt that pattern? And I know you did touch on it a bit earlier, but if
that pattern by working with it, essentially, stop avoiding it is the key. Know that it's safe. It's not there to attack you. You're having a bad dream because your unconscious knows that you're ready to be able to actually deal with the information that's in the dream. That's why we have them. That's why we're conscious. We have 5 or 6 dreams a night. So why did you remember that one? You remembered it because you could deal with it. There's unfinished business involved in it. So normally we move into reaction. I don't want that. So what do you want? You want to understand yourself at a deep level. So we come back to that reframe. You know, when you work with a bad dream, you say, okay, well, you know, let me take the judgment out of it. This was a part of me trying to get my attention. There's no good or bad. It's just a part of me that's split off somehow. So how could I integrate whatever happened in that dream and use your imagination again? You know, so if something was attacking you, if somebody died for whatever it was, how would you like that to resolve? Imagine that scenario and just work with it like that. You know, and so you're not avoiding it, you're going right into it. You're saying, is this what you meant? And if your unconscious goes, no, that's not what I meant, then what will happen is you'll have another dream that has a similar feel and metaphor perhaps to that previous one, but it'll have some new information. But what you're doing in that imagination is you're using symbolic language to talk to your inner self. So this is how you're then working with the information of the dream rather than avoiding it. So don't stop bad dreams. That's like saying somebody's trying to give you a heads up about something and you say, no, I want to ignore them. It's like, how do I ignore somebody more effectively? It's like, well, it's you. You're trying to get your own attention.
Yeah.
So pay attention to yourself. You know, these dreams are not there to impact you. They're there to get your attention. They're there to help you develop in some way. They're saying, this is where you're stuck, and so notice that. And you say, well, I don't want to notice that I'm stuck. I want to be away from that. It's like, well, yeah, well, if you work with it, then you will be unstuck. But it only knows symbolic language. So then we have to speak with it in that way as well. You see what I mean? So this is
fantastic.
Move into it. Embrace the bad dreams. They're not bad. They're just information.
So on average, I know obviously everyone's different, but a typical client who would come to you with that avoidance of bad dreams, and then you manage to change their way of thinking, and they go deep into it. How often, like, would you start to see the bad dreams are less? Would you say it's a week, a month?
Almost instantly.
Is it?
Instantly, yeah. Yeah, I mean, you know, what happens is, it depends how you approach it. You know, if you open it, if you're very open with yourself, then you start to assume more responsibility for yourself, you know, and so it's not like this is happening to me, but actually I'm an active player in my own life, and that includes my dream world. So when you start to move more into that, then the dreams resolve. You know, this is. And it might sound like, oh, you know, I've had this dream for so long and whatever, but that's how long you've been ignoring yourself. You know, very often what I do in therapy is actually argue for the unconscious. You know, it's a voiceless part of you, and it's trying to help you to grow. And we often just think, oh, well, I wake up, that was weird, and let's have a coffee. You know, that's the relationship we have. You know, when it comes to the dream world, just notice what happens. We go to sleep at night, we knock ourselves out. We basically put our left brain into the coma. And then the right brain starts to become active and show you loads of things that are important for you to know. That's the first time that it really gets that information of the day and gets to play with it, and it shows you some dreams. And we mostly ignore it. That's how bad the relationship usually is. You have to be in a coma before the rest of your brain starts to show you information about yourself. So
what do you think the reason is that we do avoid it, that we do all the wrong things, basically? What do you think the reason is? Is it the way that we're wired up?
No, I think it's cultural conditioning more than anything else. You know, you find cultures that are very much embracing of dreams, and they work with them, and they integrate the messages, and they have a great time with them. And I'm not saying that all the dreams are lovey-dovey, whatever. You know, they're really not, but they teach them something about themselves. It's part of a growth process. Because the unconscious takes in far more information than the conscious mind can process. We know that. You know, every second, 11 million bits of data coming through your senses. And the conscious mind at most processes something like 110, something like that. Right? So
that's some filtering, isn't it?
It's a huge gap. You're never going to understand what your unconscious process is, and you don't need to. Because if you did, you'd have to have control over your breath, you'd have to control your digestive system and all the release of hormones and enzymes and all that kind of stuff. You don't need that. You don't, as a conscious mind, you're on a need-to-know basis, right? But when you need to know, that's when the unconscious processes things and knocks it out. But what we do is we teach kids from a very early age, this isn't important, it was just a dream, ignore that. That was part of your lived experience, and it's immediately dismissed. So now you have a schism in the mind which says, I know that that's what I experienced and that was difficult, but it's supposed to be not real.
Well, I think that's, that really, it really gives a great insight to, I imagine, a lot of people who are just unfamiliar with I think the patterns, like you say, it's almost like a cultural thing that we're stuck in. One last question for you. I'm going to pick a good one. Is neurofeedback is being applied to solve anxiety and depression, etc. What is your opinion about it?
That's what we're using in the app. we have a program at the Institute, Monroe Institute, called the Discovery Program, and we put on EEGs onto the participants, and we can do neuroentrainment. Essentially, you can do that with getting the neurofeedback, so you actually see your brainwaves in action, changing over time as you listen to these meditations and these exercises, or without them, you know, you can guide yourself into these spaces because they work like training wheels. You know, it's like stabilizers on a bike. first of all, your brain needs to know how to get into that configuration, and that's what the neurofeedback provides you with. It shows you, hey, look, this happened. But you can also get that through feeling. Oh, yeah, this feels different. And when you do that, you anchor that feeling, and you notice what it's like to put back in there. So with or without the EEG, you will know that you're in a different space. So you can take yourself out of a problem space. So it's very much the case that neurofeedback has informed how we actually create the audio technology. So everything that is in the app and in our residential programs, in our online programs, what I use with my clients, over Zoom and so on, all of those things, first of all, started with actually measuring people's brainwaves and saying, what's the optimal state for them to be in when they're deeply relaxed or when they're very focused, when they wouldn't need to sleep and so on. And then what we do is we create frequencies or sounds that then help the brain to get particular frequencies which are conducive to each of those states. So that's I'm totally what is that, David? I'm totally sold on it. That's exactly what we're doing. And
if you have clients who would rather, the ones that are actually want to see the data, so you say they do the meditation, they do the mindfulness, and then they see the actual brainwaves changing. Do they perform better than ones that don't?
No, not really. Not really. Because once you've got a feel for it, I mean, I run weekend workshops sometimes, and where I am in Lancashire, and people come in, and by the end of the weekend, they just know that they can get into these spaces. They know that they've been in an expanded state of consciousness in some way. They've been away from their problem spaces and so on. So you can do it with that feedback, visually represented, and it's a great convincer. But also, the biggest convincer is how you feel and how you think. And then obviously, it's like, well, did that work? Well, are you still getting nightmares? No. Are you more relaxed in the day? Yes. Are you sleeping better? Yes. That's the biggest convincer. Whether your brain, was showing that it was in deep delta or a lighter delta or whatever, most people really don't care. The effect is, I feel so much better the next day. I feel I've never slept like that since, and like it's wonderful, and I can recreate that and so on. So that is the biggest feedback, is people's lived experience, because we're subjective beings.
No, that's fantastic, and I think that's a great place to end the live. I'd really want to thank you for coming on and sharing your wisdom with the community. If people want to see more of you on Instagram or your website, can you just let them know where to find you? And also, you say that you've got the workshops, so in the UK and abroad as well, and that just the websites there and the app.
Okay, so the main Monroe Institute website is monroeinstitute.org. That will take you to the US side, which shows you where everything's taking place all over the world. Obviously, we have the Expand Beyond Meditation app, which you've pinned, and then you can play with that to your heart's content. In the UK, there's monroeinstituteuk.org, so all one word, .org. That's what I manage. Very directly, so that will have all the programs and so on that we do in the UK. And then there's dayandnighttherapy.com, all one word, and the and is written AND. That's where I do the one-on-one client work. So those and the Instagram handle is TMI UK, and there's also one Monroe Institute if you want to follow the US. So yeah, I think that's all the info. And by all means, drop me an email. You'll find that on the Monroe Institute UK website. I'm Luigi, and Monroe at monroeinstituteuk.org. If you
fantastic. Just out of interest, which part of Lancashire are you from? I'm originally from Lancashire as well.
Yeah. Well, I was born in Blackburn, and I live in Darwin.
Fantastic.
So, yeah. What about yourself? Where are you?
Monroe, just like a little village on the other side of Rochdale. So yeah. Now reside in North Wales, though, but yeah, you can always recognise the Lancashire accent, that's for sure.
Yeah, I often confuse people because, they see a name Luigi Chambarella and they think in Italian. My parents are Italian, but I was born in England. I speak both languages, but yeah, I've certainly got more of a an accent from this region.
Fantastic. Well, again, Luigi, thank you so much for all the insights. So we'll get all the information up on the stories. You'll be able to listen and watch the podcast on Spotify, on Apple, and on the DLC Anxiety community page. Thank you so much, and hopefully we'll speak to you again, Luigi.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Dean. Anytime.
No worries. Take care, buddy.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.